What if I told you that magnificent Victorian mansions were not just houses, but actual complex machines designed for the perfect life of the elite? These buildings concealed from prying eyes a whole network of secret passages, double walls, and ingenious engineering tricks that most guests were unaware of. The architects of the time created not just dwellings, but multi-level systems where each space had its own specific function, and servants and masters could exist without ever crossing paths. The truly ingenious layout allowed the huge house to function with clockwork precision, providing the highest level of comfort for its owners. The Victorian era, with its strict class divisions and desire for privacy, gave rise to architecture where the invisibility of servants was the main goal. Watch the video to the end to find out how Victorian English architects ensured that the maid serving tea was not seen and that the entire house ran on a perfect hidden schedule. Are you ready to learn a secret that will change your perception of Victorian luxury? The main architectural trick of Victorian mansions was to create two parallel worlds within one building: the world of the owners, or the front house, and the world of the servants, or the working house. This system was designed so that servants could perform their duties, appearing before their masters only at strictly designated times and without disturbing their privacy. This division was not accidental or a secondary decision. It was incorporated into the design at the planning stage of the house. Architecture became an instrument of social order that had to function daily and without fail. The key to this system was an extensive network of service staircases and hidden corridors. They ensured the invisible movement of staff throughout the house. Thanks to this, the owners could almost never encounter those who served them. Service staircases were usually narrow, steep, and located in the very heart of the house, behind thick walls, hidden from the formal halls. They were made as practical and unadorned as possible. Comfort was not considered important here. These staircases were built from cheaper wood, without decoration or carpets. They served as real transport arteries for carrying coal, food, laundry, and other heavy loads. There was constant movement on them, almost around the clock. Most often, such staircases began in the basement, where the kitchens, pantries, and boiler rooms were located. From there, they led directly to the bedrooms and dressing rooms of the servants on the upper floors. Thus, the entire working route was completely isolated from the formal life of the house. Special narrow corridors were always laid out in close proximity to the dining room, living room, and library. They allowed the servants to discreetly deliver food and drinks and clear away dishes. Guests were not supposed to see the service process itself. For example, a corridor could lead directly from the kitchen to a small service area next to the dining room. From there, waiters could appear instantly and disappear just as quickly. To guests, it looked almost like magic. These passages were often so narrow that two people could barely turn around in them. This emphasizes that the convenience of the staff was sacrificed for efficiency. The main thing was to complete the task quickly and remain unnoticed. A particularly ingenious element was the so-called double or secret doors. They were built directly into the walls next to the formal rooms. At first glance, they looked like part of the wall or decorative panel. On the other hand, such a door opened into a service corridor. This allowed the butler or maid to enter and leave the room without passing through the formal areas. The guest might not even notice where the servant came from. There were also special music corridors. They were intended for musicians hired for balls and receptions. These passages led directly to balconies or niches for the orchestra. The musicians could start playing, appearing as if out of nowhere. At the end of the evening, they left the house just as quietly. This reinforced the feeling of a perfectly organized space. In the largest mansions, the service corridors were so extensive that they formed a veritable labyrinth. It existed parallel to the ceremonial halls and living rooms. The lives of the owners and the work of the servants hardly ever intersected. The purpose of these architectural solutions was not only social separation. The main task was to create the illusion of impeccable service. The house had to look as if it functioned on its own. For guests, everything happened as if by magic. Food appeared on the table, fireplaces burned, rooms were perfectly tidy. No one was supposed to see the hard work behind this picture. These hidden communications were vital for the work of a large staff of servants. They allowed them to act quickly, smoothly, and almost silently. This was considered the basis of good manners. Thanks to this architecture, servants did their work while remaining in the shadows. It was the cornerstone of Victorian etiquette. The house was transformed into a two-layered organism, where one layer provided comfort and the other provided illusion. We are very interested to hear your opinion. What do you think about this system of dividing space? Do you consider it the pinnacle of engineering or a manifestation of social injustice? Share your thoughts in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. I discovered this by accident. How did the servants in a huge 3-story mansion know that the master in his library on the 3rd floor urgently needed another glass of whiskey? This question bothered me for a long time. At first glance, it seems that running servants and shouting are unavoidable. But the Victorian era was full of surprising technical solutions, even in everyday life. Victorian mansions had a complex and incredibly effective internal communication system that ensured the servants could respond instantly to any whim of their masters. It allowed them to manage a large house with almost no unnecessary movement. The masters did not need to leave the room or raise their voices. One simple action was enough. This system, based on mechanical bells and voice tubes, was essentially the equivalent of a modern intercom. It was designed to cover large distances within the house. Architects incorporated it into the building design in advance. Without it, maintaining the mansion would have been extremely difficult. Mechanical bells were the most common. They were installed in almost all residential and representative rooms. They were considered an essential element of a comfortable home. Without them, a mansion looked outdated. In every important room of the mansion, whether it was a bedroom, study, or living room, there was a special button or cord on the wall. Sometimes they were disguised as decorative elements. This was done so as not to spoil the appearance of the interior. At the same time, access to them was always convenient. When the button was pressed or the cord was pulled, a mechanical impulse was transmitted along the taut wire to a special panel in the service area. The wires ran inside the walls and ceilings. Most often, the panel was located near the kitchen. This was logical since the servants were always there. The call panel was a large board with a row of bells and small windows. It looked austere and functional. Each element had its own purpose. A mistake could lead to a delay. When the bell rang, the corresponding bell would ring, and a sign with the name of the room would appear in the window. This happened almost instantly. The servants immediately understood where they were needed. In large houses, there could be several dozen such windows. Inscriptions such as dining room, my lord's study, or lady's drawing room left no room for doubt. Servants were required to know the layout of the house by heart. Response time was considered an indicator of good service. The faster the response, the higher the reputation of the staff. In later and more technologically advanced mansions, a pneumatic bell system began to be used. It was considered more modern and prestigious. Such systems were more common in the homes of very wealthy owners. This emphasized their status. Instead of wire, compressed air, or a rubber bulb was used to send a signal to the panel. This made the system more reliable. It suffered less from wear and tear. The signal remained clear even after many years. This was an important improvement as mechanical wires could weaken or break. The house required constant maintenance. Any breakdown caused irritation to the owners. Therefore, reliability was particularly highly valued. Another key element of communication was talking pipes. Designed for direct communication between remote parts of the house, they connected floors and service rooms. They were especially important in large mansions. Without them, communication took too long. Most often, the pipes connected the kitchen in the basement and the master's study. This allowed instructions to be transmitted without intermediaries. The system was simple but effective. It worked even in poor lighting and noise. To talk, you had to open a small valve at the end of the tube and speak directly into it. The voice was amplified and transmitted through the tube. It was like talking through a megaphone. The sound was quite clear. The person on the other end put their ear to the opening and listened. Sometimes it was necessary to repeat the message, but most often the message was understood the first time. This saved the servants time and energy. This entire system required constant attention and care. Nothing worked on its own. Its condition was monitored daily. Responsibility for this lay with the senior servants. The servants had to not only respond instantly to calls, but also check the condition of the mechanisms. A loose cord or a clogged pipe was considered a serious problem. The efficiency of the house depended on small details. The mansion functioned as a single organism. Thus, the Victorian mansion was entangled in an invisible network of communication that gave the servants no peace. Every signal meant an order. It was almost impossible to truly relax. The house was always on alert. In return, the owners enjoyed uninterrupted comfort and a feeling of complete control. The house functioned like a well-oiled machine. Every command was carried out almost instantly. This was the true sign of luxury in that era. But knowledge of the area was only half the battle. Are you ready to learn how Victorian architects turned boring walls into secret doors, and how rooms appeared in houses that even close friends didn't know existed? You've definitely never heard of this unique secret. If you think that hiding places and secret rooms are the invention of adventure novelists, you are deeply mistaken. In the Victorian era, the creation of hidden spaces was not only a tribute to fashion and romanticism, but also a practical necessity for preserving valuables and secrets. These were real architectural puzzles that could be hidden behind ordinary interior elements. The most common option was a book door in the library. The architects skillfully disguised the passageway, making it part of a fake bookcase, or even creating book spines that were glued to the door itself. Pressing a certain volume or turning a decorative element activated a hidden mechanism that opened access to a secret room. Such rooms could serve as the owner's private office, where he could conduct business in absolute silence and seclusion without fear of being overheard. More often, they were used as safes. Important documents, family jewels, expensive alcoholic beverages, or simply personal diaries were stored in them. Such spaces were known only to a small circle of initiates. Another way to conceal a space was to use double walls or specially thickened niches in the walls. In this case, access to the hiding place could be gained through a sliding panel disguised as decorative molding or wood paneling. This was the ideal protection against unauthorized access. In some cases, especially in houses with a rich history or specific requests from the owners, hidden rooms could be located behind the fireplace, which was the centerpiece of the room. Turning a special lever or pressing a specific tile could move the mantelpiece or even part of the cladding, opening the passage. For greater security, the opening mechanisms could be quite complex. They included counterweights, hidden gears, springs, or even simple but reliable systems of ropes and blocks. The secret of such mechanisms was passed down from generation to generation and was not recorded in drawings. Secret rooms demonstrated the Victorian elite's desire for complete control over their personal space and information. The richer and more influential a person was, the more secrets they needed to protect. Thus, these hidden spaces were the architectural embodiment of private life. This architectural trick allowed owners to live in their own world, isolating themselves not only from servants, but also from intrusive guests and prying eyes. Like this video if you think such ingenuity in architecture deserves admiration. What you are about to learn will change your perception of Victorian engineering. How were huge stone mansions heated and ventilated in an era when central heating was just beginning to develop? Victorian architects developed complex, though not always perfect, ventilation and heating systems that were built into the very structure of the house. The heating system was based, of course, on numerous fireplaces, which were located in every important room. However, their role was not limited to heating. In the Victorian era, it was realized that open fires quickly burned oxygen and created drafts, so a more sophisticated system was needed. Fireplaces were considered part of the overall air circulation scheme inside the house. They were placed in a carefully thought-out manner so that the heat was distributed not randomly, but in specific directions. Architects tried to take into account the size of the room, the height of the ceilings, and even the arrangement of the furniture so that the fire would work as efficiently as possible. A system known as a hypocaust, or, in simpler terms, a system of channels in the walls was developed. Essentially, it was a network of air ducts laid inside the walls that took in fresh air from outside, heated it with heat from stoves and fireplaces, and fed it into the rooms. This created the effect of soft, distributed heat. Similar ideas were inspired by Roman architecture, but in the Victorian era, they were adapted to new materials and building sizes. The ducts were made of brick or ceramic and carefully concealed within the masonry. Residents often had no idea that the heat in the room was traveling along a complex route inside the walls. It is important to understand that such a system did not provide rapid heating. The house warmed up slowly, but the heat lasted longer. This was especially appreciated in stone mansions, where the walls were thick and cold. Special exhaust ducts were used for ventilation. They were located at the top of the rooms, often disguised as decorative moldings, and led to a common exhaust pipe on the roof. The principle was simple. Warm, used air rose and was drawn out, creating an influx of fresh air from below. This system worked by natural draft without any mechanisms. The greater the temperature difference between the street and the room, the more active the air exchange was. That is why ventilation was more effective in winter than in summer. Another element was the ventilation fireplace. In some rooms, the fireplace was fake or used exclusively for extraction. It had its own separate duct, which helped remove odors, dust, and stale air from the room. Such fireplaces were often installed in bedrooms or studies. There was no need for a constant fire there, but fresh air was especially important. This was considered a sign of concern for the health and comfort of the residents. Often there was a huge furnace or boiler room in the basement or ground floor that generated heat for the entire house. Hot air or hot water was distributed throughout the house through pipes and more advanced systems, passing through special cavities in the walls and floors. Such boiler rooms were serviced by separately hired workers. It was necessary to constantly monitor the fuel, temperature, and condition of the pipes. Any mistake could result in part of the house being left without heat. Over time, the first water radiators appeared, but they were not yet widespread. Often, new elements were added to old systems, creating complex and confusing engineering schemes. The problem was that all these systems were unreliable and required constant maintenance. Ventilation ducts often became clogged with soot and dust, and uneven heating meant that some rooms were very warm, while others were unbearably cold. In addition, homeowners did not always understand how to use the system properly. Closed dampers or incorrectly opened windows disrupted the air balance. This reduced the efficiency of the entire structure. Ventilation systems were also important for combating odors. In houses with large numbers of people, fireplaces, and gas lighting, the issue of fresh air was very acute. Architects tried to isolate the kitchen and service rooms as much as possible, as these were the sources of unpleasant odors. Gas lamps further deteriorated air quality, as they emitted harmful substances when burning. Therefore, proper ventilation was considered a necessity rather than a luxury. Doctors of the time actively supported such engineering solutions. Thus, the Victorian mansion was permeated by an invisible network of airways that allowed it to breathe, but often did so intermittently. Nevertheless, it was the pinnacle of engineering thought of its time, striving to create a healthy and warm space. These houses became an important step on the way to modern heating and ventilation systems. Many of the mistakes of the Victorian era were later taken into account and corrected. But without these experiments, the development of engineering would have been impossible. In the next chapter, we will talk about how this system affected the structure of the kitchen. Ready to learn more? The Victorian kitchen was not the cozy place we imagine today. It was a real industrial enterprise, usually located in the basement or ground floor, as far away from the living quarters as possible. This location was dictated not only by the desire to hide the servants, but also by practical considerations. Firstly, it was related to heat and smell. The huge coal stoves and ovens needed to cook for a large family, and numerous servants gave off enormous amounts of heat and smoke. Placing the kitchen in the basement helped to isolate the living quarters from the heat and specific kitchen smells. Secondly, the basement was a convenient place to store food. It housed pantries, wine cellars, and ice houses, special rooms with thick walls where large blocks of ice were brought in to keep meat and dairy products fresh. The ice served as a kind of Victorian refrigerator. In close proximity to the kitchen was the so-called pantry, where dry goods such as flour, sugar, cereals, and spices were stored. This space was usually supervised by the butler or housekeeper, who strictly monitored consumption. The kitchen was connected to other parts of the house by a complex network of service staircases and lifts. Special small lifts, or ladies' lifts, were used to lift prepared meals upstairs to the dining room. This minimized the need for manual labor and the risk of spilling anything on the way. Next to the kitchen was a dishwashing room, where servants spent hours scrubbing porcelain, silver, and crystal. Since hot water was in short supply, this was one of the most difficult and labor-intensive processes in the house. The entire basement was a hub of engineering systems. In addition to the kitchen, there was a boiler room with the main boiler for heating and hot water, as well as a coal storage room. Servants spent a lot of time carrying coal and maintaining the fire. Thus, the basement and kitchen were the center that kept the entire mansion running. It was the dirtiest, hottest, and busiest place in the house, where there was no room for luxury. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of Victorian banquets? The dining room in a Victorian mansion was a place of strict rituals, and the architecture of the room was designed to maintain these rituals with maximum efficiency. The main task was to ensure that food was always served hot and that the service was impeccable and did not distract from the conversation. Every element of the space was subject to the rules of etiquette and social order. The arrangement of the furniture, the distance between guests, and even the width of the passageways for servants were all important. The dining room was not just a room for eating, but a demonstration of the family's status, upbringing, and wealth. To maintain the temperature of the dishes, special heated cabinets or sideboards were used, which were located in close proximity to the table. These cabinets, often made of precious wood and looking like part of the interior, had a heating system inside. Hot water or even steam circulated inside, keeping the plates and dishes warm. From the outside, these cabinets looked like ordinary furniture and did not reveal their purpose. Guests saw only beautiful carvings and polished surfaces, but inside was an important mechanism that allowed the food to be kept warm until it was served. One of the most ingenious devices was the plate warmer, which was often built into the fireplace niche in the dining room. It was a metal cabinet that was heated by the warmth of the fireplace and allowed dishes to be served on perfectly warm plates, which was important for preserving the taste. Victorians understood perfectly well that cold dishes spoil the impression of even the best meal. Therefore, they took this issue seriously. A warm plate was considered a sign of a good home and an attentive host. Some mansions used built-in wall niches or small elevators that led directly to the kitchen. They allowed dishes to be quickly raised or lowered, minimizing travel time and, accordingly, the risk of cooling. The butler could get a ready-made dish straight from the wall, as if by magic. Such solutions were especially appreciated during large receptions. The kitchen could be located far away, sometimes in the basement or in a separate wing. Elevators and niches shortened the distance and made service almost invisible. Special attention was paid to the lighting of the table. A massive gas chandelier often hung above the dining table, the light of which could be adjusted. This created the perfect atmosphere for dinner, focusing attention on the guests and the food, while leaving the rest of the room in semi-darkness. Adjusting the light allowed the mood of the evening to be changed. Bright light was used at the beginning of dinner, and softer light during long conversations. The light became part of the ritual and enhanced the feeling of comfort and solemnity. Next to the dining room was always the butler's pantry, or buffet room. This is where the silverware, porcelain, crystal, and everything else needed for serving was kept. This room served as an intermediate point between the kitchen and the dining room, where waiters could quickly prepare cutlery and drinks without having to return to the basement each time. The pantry was the working heart of the service. Here, the cleanliness of the cutlery was checked, napkins were laid out, and dishes were prepared. Everything had to be at hand so as not to disrupt the rhythm of the feast. The architectural layout of the doors was also carefully thought out. The doors to the service corridor were positioned so that they were not visible to guests during meals. This allowed the servants to move around unnoticed and quickly. Even the sound of doors opening was kept to a minimum. Thick panels and special hinges were used. Guests were only supposed to see the food and each other, not the service process. All these details, from heating to hidden passageways, turned the dining room into the perfect setting for a Victorian feast, where luxury was combined with absolute functionality. The efficiency of the service was the main indicator of the host's status. The more inconspicuous the servants were, the higher the status of the house was considered to be. The perfect dinner looked easy and natural, although it was backed by complex architecture and strict organization of space. The ambush was effective, but how did Victorian homes deal with waste disposal? In the next chapter, we will talk about their unique cleaning and sewage system. Ready to learn more? The issue of waste and dirty laundry disposal in Victorian mansions was solved with invisible but highly effective systems that helped keep the formal rooms clean. Cleaning a huge house where a large family and numerous servants lived required constant effort that had to remain unnoticed. Special attention was paid to dirty laundry. Special shafts or laundry chutes were built into the walls of the mansions, which were vertical channels leading directly from the bedrooms and dressing rooms to the basement laundry room. This allowed the maids to quickly throw the laundry down without having to carry heavy baskets up and down the stairs. The laundry room, like the kitchen, was located in the basement or in a separate wing so that the noise of washing, the smell of soap, and steam would not disturb the owners. It was equipped with huge cast iron boilers in which laundry was boiled and massive roller machines for wringing it out. There was a separate disposal system for solid household waste. Each room had special bins, the contents of which were regularly taken out into the service corridors by the servants. From there, the waste was taken to garbage bins located in the backyard or in a special niche in the basement. These garbage bins usually had ventilation pipes leading to the roof to prevent odors from entering the house. Burning garbage was common practice, and a special incinerator could be installed at the back of the property for this purpose. With the development of sewage systems, Victorian mansions began to be equipped with complex plumbing systems. Pipes were laid in walls and floors, often concealed and virtually invisible. This was one of the most expensive and complex parts of building a house. Special plumbing cabinets, or toilets, were located in remote corners of the house so that the noise of flushing and odors would not cause discomfort. In wealthy homes, they were located on each floor, but access to them was strictly separated for servants and owners. In this way, Victorian architects created an invisible cleaning and disposal system that ensured hygiene and cleanliness while remaining completely invisible to the inhabitants of the front rooms. It was a quiet, daily task of maintaining perfect order. Lighting in Victorian mansions evolved from candles to gas lamps, and finally to the first electrical systems. Each of these technologies changed not only everyday life, but also the architecture of the house itself. Engineers and architects had to find ways to incorporate light sources so that they provided brightness without disrupting the harmony of the interiors or threatening the safety of the residents. Light in a Victorian home was seen as a sign of progress and prosperity. The better and more modern the lighting system, the higher the status of the owners. Therefore, wealthy families willingly invested in new solutions, even if they were complex and expensive. At the beginning of the Victorian era, candles and oil lamps remained the main sources of light. They created soft but dim lighting, which meant that rooms were plunged into semi-darkness in the evening. Large halls were lit by dozens of candles placed in chandeliers and wall sconces. Such light sources required constant attention from the servants. The wicks had to be trimmed, oil had to be added, and soot had to be cleaned off regularly. For this purpose, the house had special utility rooms for cleaning lamps and storing consumables. The installation of gas pipes required high precision and reliability, as gas leaks were deadly. Connections were carefully checked, and materials were selected with great care. Any mistake could lead to fire or poisoning. Gas lamps and chandeliers were often massive and richly decorated. They were placed in the center of rooms, becoming an important element of decor. Light was no longer hidden, but displayed as an achievement of progress. The main disadvantage of gas lighting was that it emitted a large amount of heat, soot, and combustion products. Ceilings and walls quickly darkened, and paintings and textiles suffered from contamination. This became a serious problem for expensive interiors. It was for this reason that architects began to pay more attention to ventilation. Exhaust ducts and special openings helped to remove polluted air. Gas lighting directly influenced the development of engineering systems in the home. The advent of electricity at the end of the Victorian era became the next major architectural challenge. Electric light was cleaner and safer, but the technology was new and little understood. Homeowners treated it with caution. Electrical wires had to be laid in existing buildings. This often required opening up walls, ceilings, and decorative elements. The work was slow and very expensive. The first electrical systems were unreliable and often broke down. Because of this, mansions retained a dual lighting system for a long time. Electric light bulbs could coexist with gas lamps or even candles. This backup allowed people to avoid being left in the dark in case of failure. In the evening, it was possible to light gas or candles if the electricity suddenly went out. This was considered a sensible and practical solution. Ceramic insulators and special channels were used for electrical wiring inside the walls. They protected the wires from overheating and reduced the risk of fire. Safety remained a top priority. Concealing the wires was extremely important. Exposed cables were considered unacceptable in formal rooms. Architects did everything possible to ensure that new technologies did not disrupt the classic appearance of rooms. Thus, Victorian mansions became real testing grounds for new lighting systems. Old and new technologies coexisted here. It was this experience that laid the foundation for modern home lighting. The architecture of the facade of a Victorian mansion also reflected the internal division of the house into the worlds of the owners and servants, and this was even noticeable in the windows. The external appearance of the building revealed its layout and social order inside. The facade facing the street and the main entrance was always more ornate, symmetrical, and imposing. This main facade was created as the family's calling card. It was what guests, neighbors, and casual passers-by saw. It was meant to inspire respect and emphasize the stability and high status of the owners of the house. The windows of the formal rooms, such as the living room, dining room, and study, were large, tall, and richly decorated. They occupied the central axis of the facade and emphasized its symmetry. The size of the windows directly indicated the importance of the rooms inside. The windows had expensive frames, often with stained glass or decorative carvings, and offered the best views. They opened onto the garden, the front courtyard, or a busy street. These windows served not only to provide light, but also to demonstrate the taste and wealth of the owners. Inside, such windows were complemented by heavy curtains and thick drapes made of expensive fabrics. During the day, they were neatly draped, creating an effect of comfort and solemnity. Light penetrated the room softly and evenly. At night, these curtains reliably closed off private space from prying eyes. They emphasized that, despite the outward openness, the family's life remained closed to outsiders. This was an important part of the Victorian conception of privacy. At the same time, the windows of the service rooms and servants' quarters looked completely different. They immediately revealed their utilitarian purpose. Such windows were never located on the main facade. They were smaller in size, had a simple frame, and were located on the rear or side facade. They were often located on the upper floors or in the basement. This emphasized the secondary role of these spaces. These windows were strictly functional and were intended only for minimal light and ventilation. They were not decorated or visually distinguished. The main requirement for them was practicality. Often, such windows were located high above the floor or ground level. This was done intentionally to limit visibility. Servants were not supposed to observe the lives of their masters or what was happening outside the house. This architectural division of the facade was part of the social code of the Victorian era. It reflected the rigid hierarchy of society. Architecture directly supported these rules. The facade clearly showed which part of the house was intended for social life and displaying status. At the same time, it concealed the working areas without which the house could not function. This division was perceived as natural and correct. The differences were so obvious that any attentive passerby could determine the purpose of the rooms. The internal structure of the mansion was easily discernible by the size, shape, and location of the windows. The house itself seemed to tell the story of its hierarchy. Sometimes, in order to better conceal the service windows, architects resorted to clever tricks. They were placed behind high decorative parapets or incorporated into intricate stone carvings. Thanks to this, the exterior of the mansion remained intact, austere, and majestic. The separation of the worlds of the owners and the servants began right on the street, with the presence of two completely different entrances to the mansion: the front entrance and the service entrance. At first glance, the house showed who was in charge and who should remain invisible. The front entrance was the face of the house, the place where guests were welcomed, and it was decorated as lavishly and solemnly as possible. It was through the front entrance that the first impression of the family was formed. It spoke of the wealth, taste, and social status of the owners. Architects paid special attention to it, as this element of the house was seen by all guests. The front doors were massive, made of oak or other valuable woods, decorated with carvings, wrought iron elements, and bright polished brass. They looked heavy and reliable, emphasizing the status of the house. Often the doors were double and opened into a spacious hall. A wide, often marble staircase with symmetrical railings led to the front entrance. In front of the doors, there was always a canopy or portico to protect guests from rain and snow. The driveway to such an entrance was designed for carriages so that guests could get out right at the door. Inside, the front entrance led to a large hall, which served as a buffer between the outside world and the private rooms. This space immediately set the tone for the entire house. Here, guests understood that they had arrived at the home of wealthy people. The hall was decorated with paintings, mirrors, sculptures, and expensive furniture. The floors could be tiled or marble, and the walls decorated with paneling and stucco. Everything was done to make a strong and memorable impression. The service entrance, on the other hand, was as simple and inconspicuous as possible. It was not supposed to attract attention either from the street or from the garden. Its purpose was solely to facilitate work. Usually, the service entrance was located in the backyard or on the side of the house. Often, it led directly to the basement, kitchen, or service staircase, bypassing the front rooms. This allowed the servants to move around the house without crossing paths with the guests. The service entrance door was simple, wooden, and unadorned. Sometimes it was noticeably narrower and lower than the front door. This contrast emphasized the social divide between the worlds of the owners and the service staff. This entrance was intended for everyone involved in the service of the house: servants, coal suppliers, postmen, laundresses, and delivery men passed through it. Their presence was not supposed to disturb the external order and tranquility of the front part of the house. People who used the service entrance were required to follow strict rules. They were not allowed to appear in the front areas without good reason. Even the time of their movements was often chosen so as not to intersect with the owners. Provisions, coal, and other necessities were delivered through the service entrance. Special lifts, ramps, or hatches could be located next to it. All this facilitated the transportation of heavy loads to the basement. The basement next to the service entrance became the center of the household's economic life. It housed storerooms, coal pits, and kitchens. The front part of the house remained clean and quiet. The separation of entrances was not just an architectural detail, but a strict rule of etiquette. It reflected the social order of Victorian society. Everyone had to know their place and use only the spaces intended for them. A guest who accidentally used the service entrance was considered to be ignorant of the rules of propriety. Such an act could be perceived as an insult to the host. This emphasizes how important this separation was. Thus, a Victorian mansion presented two separate but connected spaces from the street. They existed side by side but hardly intersected. One was intended for ceremonies, receptions, and public life. The other space was used for hard, daily, and unnoticed work. It was this space that ensured the comfort and splendor of the front part of the house. Without this hidden side, the luxury of a Victorian home would have been impossible. We can see that the architecture of a Victorian mansion is much more than just beautifully decorated facades and high ceilings. It was a complex, multi-layered system that was designed with one main goal in mind: to provide maximum comfort and privacy for the elite by creating an invisible world of servants. We can see that the architecture of a Victorian mansion is much more than just beautifully decorated facades and high ceilings. It was a complex, multi-layered system that was designed with one main goal in mind: to provide maximum comfort and privacy for the elite by creating an invisible world of servants. Hidden staircases, speaking tubes, secret rooms, and double entrances turned the house into a perfectly tuned mechanism. This architecture was a direct reflection of the social order of Victorian England, where invisible labor was the price of luxury. All these ingenious solutions made it possible to create the image of an ideal, carefree life, behind which lay the intense, round-the-clock work of an entire staff of servants. Which architectural trick do you find most ingenious, and why? Was it the book door technique or the masterful use of ventilation ducts? Share your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new research into the architectural secrets of the past.